realize.
Good evening, everyone, and hearty welcome to all the teachers, educators, and academicians who've joined for this session. That is collaborative session with CENTA. Just let us remember the Almighty for 30 seconds before we start. Okay, can we just have that silent player, please? Thank you, everyone. I'll just begin with thanking the Almighty who diminishes the darkness, that is the light. Deepam Jyoti Parabrahma, Deepam Jyoti Janardana, Deepo Harati Papani, Sandhya Deepam Namostute. A hearty welcome to all of you. Very happy to introduce CENTA, the Center for Teacher Accreditation, which is registered certification trademark in India, catering to the entire professional life of a teacher. That is the certification, career growth, professional development, and helping organizations to recruit, support, and grow the teachers towards high quality education. Center currently serves around 6 lakh teachers and 12,000 institutional leaders, promoters from across 6,000 plus cities, towns, villages, across India, and also 40,000 teachers from other countries like UAE, Philippines, Nigeria, etc. Very happy to associate, and I'm sure Bangalore Sahodaya School Complex Association principals, teachers, educators, all of them will benefit. Also, I'm glad to tell recently we have attended CENTA's program for quality training, which was associated with CBSE, and I have found it really interesting and an enriching experience, in fact. And today we have with us, if I'm right, it is Miss Upasna who is here with us. Am I right, Upasna? Please get me right. Okay. Um, and yes, these Upasna Sahu as well as Shruti Bhatt will be the facilitators for today's session, that is launching of webinar series for teachers. And Upasna is the lead for assessment and certification team at Center. She holds a bachelor's degree in biotechnology from Bangalore University. She has worked in an MNC for 8 years before transitioning to education, where she taught in various places like Bangalore, Pune, and New York. She has also done the Teach for India Fellowship and was working as a curriculum designer before joining Center. Welcome, Ms. Upasna.
Thank you.
And Ms. Shruti is the lead for Learning Products team at Center. She holds a bachelor's degree in information science from Vishwesvaraya University. She has worked as a software developer in an MNC for 2 years before transitioning to education, where she taught primary grades in a low income school as a part of her Teach for India fellowship. That was I take privilege in. After introducing Upasna and Shruti, in welcoming them to really go ahead with the webinar series. All the very best to both of you. And this bonding, I'm sure my teachers and educators will benefit because I have been a part of it. And previously, also, Bangalore Sahodaya School Complex Association was in Connect, and the bond has grown today in large numbers, and so many other schools have also been benefited because of this. Welcome once again, and over to you, Upasna and Shruti.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Priya ma'am. I'll share my screen and then we can get started. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to the BSSCA CENTA Webinar Series for teachers and school leaders. As many of you know, this is the first of the entire webinar series. And in today's session or workshop, we are going to talk about how to create impactful MCQs. So once again, Upasana and I welcome all of you. We are very, very happy and excited to begin today's workshop. Before we start, I just thought I'll take the opportunity to quickly introduce all of you, whoever does not know about CENTA, to a little bit of what we do. So CENTA basically supports the teacher's entire career cycle. And this we do using our CENTA standards, which is a comprehensive competency framework that CENTA has developed, which is globally recognized. And the MyCENTA tech-enabled platform, which is our forum which has around more than 6 lakh teachers on it, 6.5 lakh teachers on it. And how we do this entire teachers career life cycle support is through our certifications. As you can see, we have the CENTA teaching quotient, we have CENTA micro credentials, and the TPO, that is an annual teacher professional Olympiad that we do. So we also do this using our personalized self-paced trainings, which are a combination of high-quality free resources, CENTA accredited programs, full university-linked graduate, postgraduate programs as well, and also short courses and trainings that we do like this one. And career development for teachers, which is basically helping teachers get different career opportunities and helping them grow using their CENTA TQ scores. So we are very, very proud and happy to share that now we are a community of more than 6 lakh teachers, 90,000 schools in 6,000 plus locations, also outside India, UAE, UK, Nigeria, and Philippines. And like Pamshi ma'am mentioned, CENTA is a registered certification trademark. So on that note, I'd like to move to today's session, which mainly has 3 sections. So as all of you know, it is about creating impactful MCQs. And we're going to do this in the next 1.5 hours in 3 sections. In the first section, we will be talking about relevance of MCQs in today's world in general, and also a bit about the different types of assessment and what role where MCQ basically fits in that. Then we'll be moving on to understanding characteristics of impactful MCQs using a combination of practice questions, and you will also get to actually create your own MCQs. And in the third section, we'll be looking at some takeaways, additional resources, and we would love to get your feedback. So that's how we have planned the entire session for today, and this is the agenda. We hope everyone's excited and geared up for today's session. So let's begin with section 1, which is relevance of MCQs in today's world. So before we start with MCQs as such, right? I'm sure all of you already know this, that assessments can be in different formats or methods. I'd actually like to see in the chat box if all of you can put down different formats or methods of assessments that you are familiar with. And I'll refer to Upasana's screen. So looking for some answers, different formats of assessment that you are aware of. Okay, Kuriminelli ma'am says interview. Google Forms, great. I mean, Google Forms, of course, can be again used in, that's the tool or the software or the application that we use. Activity based, great. Roja ma'am. Oral project, great. Great answers. I'm seeing some really good answers on the chat box. Quiz, okay. Again, quiz, we may have to break that down further into what kind of quiz we're talking about. Assessment, quiz is great. Okay, so many of you have shared few answers in the chat box. Similar to what you've shared, multiple choice questions is, of course, one type of format and what we're focusing on today. You also have short answer questions, essays, match the following, projects. These are all different formats of assessments, right? And note that, of course, this is not an exhaustive list. I can see that many of you are still putting it down in the chat box. Excellent. Very happy to see that. Yeah, so there are many forms of assessments that are formal. We use them once in a while in our classrooms, so we use them every day. right? It's important to note though that all these formats of assessment, right, they mainly fit into two big buckets, which range from being fully objective assessments to being fully subjective assessments. What do we mean by this? So when we say objective assessments, these are basically assessments that are typically they have single answers, and who evaluates it doesn't really matter. Even a machine can evaluate it, right? So can you now on the chat box list down therefore what are some examples of objective type assessments? We'll do this quickly in 10 seconds. What are some examples now that you know what objective type assessments are? What are some examples of objective type assessments? Extract, big, match the following. Great. True or false? I can see some good answers. MCQs. Yeah. Picture based. Depends. Case study based questions. Okay. Is a case study based question a single answer assessment? Again, it depends on what exactly the question is. MCQs, match the following, true or false, fill in the blanks. Excellent examples, right? So, in the range of objective to subjective, the most objective are multiple choice questions, match the following, identifying from a set, categorizing the given items, and then there are those that are still objective but also come somewhere in between in the range, which is fill in the blanks, complete the sentence, verbal test with single word, number, answer. And why this comes in between is because here the answer depends on what you enter, right? It's not picking from an existing set. And of course, so these are examples of objective. I also see in the chat box, many of you put that down. Then comes the subjective type assessments. In this case, many right answers are possible, right? And evaluators' view matters, and therefore human judgment becomes important, right? So again, quickly on the chat box, what are some examples of subjective type assessments? So I'm just moving my face to see the screen with to just look at your responses. So waiting to hear some real-time applications. Vasanti ma'am says, sorry, Sudha ma'am says that. Slides are not visible, Vasanti ma'am says. Can everybody just quickly tell me if the slides are visible or not? You make that full screen. All right. This is not okay. Can someone please confirm if the slides are visible? Now? Okay. Some example, I think we need to make it full screen. Some examples of subjective type assessments, short answer, illustrations, diagrams, verbal test with short answers. Again, this comes in the range of being more subjective and less objective, and then fully objective, subjective ones include essays, demonstrations, and project work, right? And of course, again, we are not saying this is an exhaustive list. There could be more and more, but this is basically a gist of what we mean when we say assessment formats can range from fully objective to fully subjective. And of course, the focus for today's session is going to be multiple choice questions. So let me just come back to this. I will present the full screen. So then I think. No, I think we have to stop screen share now. Okay, I'm hoping that my screen is visible now. Those of you who said that it wasn't. Great. Okay, awesome. Okay, so like I mentioned, we spoke about different formats, and today's focus, as all of you know, is going to be on multiple choice questions. So, this brings us to a quick activity that we are going to do, which is on a platform called Mentimeter. I'm hoping many of you have heard of this, have used this earlier. If not, don't worry, it's very, very simple, and we're going to use this at multiple points during today's session. So, Upasana, I'll be putting it on the chat box. There is a link, it's clearly written on the slide. Go to www. So, you can open if you're on your phone or laptop. Phone, you can open another browsing window. Even on your laptop, you can just open another tab and just go to type www.menti.com and enter this passcode you see 434567777. Mentimeter. Hmm. So if you go here, you should be able to see the first question, which is basically, is that presented? What are some examples of MCQ based tests that you know of? So please put on the chat box if you're able to see the Mentimeter screen and you're able to see the question. We already have one response, great. So we are slowly getting responses. And when we say, so I'm seeing that some of you are entering Google form, fill in the blanks, objective. When we mean examples, we mean examples of MCQ based tests, which are more like organizations or entities or the name of that exam or that test that you have taken. So we mean that example and not format. What you're putting down right now are formats of objective assessment, which is not what we are asking. We are asking for examples of MCQ based tests that you know of. To give you an example, GRE is an example of an MCQ based test. Entrance exams. Entrance exams, great. Different entrance exams are examples of, usually, they are typically MCQ based tests. Okay, let me just quickly share what people are saying. I'm not able to present. Stop. Great. So you can see a lot of examples. I can see NEET, UPSC. UPSC is one of the components of the UPSC exam. CTET, excellent. Olympiad, competitive exams in general. Great, great. Wow. Getting a lot of responses. NEET, JEE. Great. Awesome. Awesome to see all your responses. Let's come back to you can now come back to the session. Waiting for everybody to come back. Saw a lot of great responses. And here are a few more examples that we have, some of it which you already shared. So CENTA tests are also predominantly MCQ based. The CENTA TQ is predominantly an MCQ based test. The CENTA TPO, which is a Teaching Professionals Olympiad, is typically or predominantly an MCQ based test. And also national exams like AIEEE, the NEET exam, then also international exams like IELTS, GRE, PISA. These are all examples of different types of MCQ based tests. So it's obvious that it is not something that has suddenly become important, but is something that's always been there and has international and national recognition. And it's also which is at the core of what we do at Center. So I'm hoping everybody is back. Please put on the chat box if you're back to the session. You please keep the Mentimeter screen on. Don't close it because we will be going back to the same window to do some practice exercises later. But now just switch back to this screen. Great. Okay.
All right. So, as most of you have written, multiple options of or cases where we've seen MCQ type of exams being conducted. Our very own CBSE exams are also conducted in the same way for both grades 10 and 12. And so, as some of you must be aware that the pattern has changed recently, where there are two board exams that are now being conducted, where the term one board exam has 50% of the syllabus being covered, and term two has rest of the 50% being covered. And term one, in fact, is a multiple choice question based exam, which is for 90 minutes. And term two is a more, longer answer. So where questions are case based, situation based, open ended, and so on and so forth. And they are typically for 2 hours, right? So this is a very an example that we can all relate to. Now let's look at why do we use MCQs, right? So, well, of course, before we actually give out the answers, if you could put on the chat box, what are some quick thoughts that you have as to why we use MCQs? What are some reasons why people use MCQs? Maybe what are some positives that we have that MCQs are preferred in some of these exams, including the CBSE board exams. So looking for some quick responses on the chat group itself. Great. So Mersina ma'am says to lessen writing load. That's a great point. No bias in corrections. I think that's a spot on response. Easy to check. For quick assessment. Great. So our answers are almost on the same line. So these are easy and rapid to grade because you have the answers which are already predefined. They hence you have since you've defined the answers, hence they are extremely objective and fair. They are extremely reliable and are consistent in how they can be used for assessments, as well as they are very easy to administer, right? So no lengthy papers required and all of those kinds of things. But in all of these, for all of these positives to work out, most importantly, the questions need to be designed with extremely high quality, and hence the work specific for MCQs happen before the test rather than after the test, right? So the most of the hard work happens prior to the test during the design phase itself. Right. Thank you so much to everyone who's been responding on the chat room. Now let's move to the next section.
Great. Thank you, Upasana. So now coming to, of course, in section one, we discussed about what MCQs assessment in general, right? What are the two broad formats of assessment? What's its relevance in today's world? And we saw so many examples of national, international competitive exams, and also our very own board exam, like Upasana mentioned, which follows this pattern. So in this section, we'll try to understand what it is that makes MCQs or what it takes to make an MCQ impactful. And we are not going to do this in a very, like we are going to share way, but you are going to be equally involved in this process. And yeah, let's get started. So before we move on to any major details about the characteristics of what makes an impactful MCQ, first let's discuss the anatomy of an MCQ. What does an MCQ even look like? Of course, most of you already know this, but we just thought it'll be a good way to just set this right before we move on to looking at it in more detail. So just like any other question, of course, MCQ stands for multiple choice question. An MCQ has a question, and this in an MCQ is usually called the stem or the question stem. And then you also have options. So for the scope of this session, we are using a stem with one question, and we have 4 options. And these are usually called alternatives. They're typically called alternatives. And in this, usually 3 of them, at least in today's discussion, 3 of them are going to be incorrect, and they are called the distractors. And one option is going to be a correct option. So we're just having an MCQ with a question stem, 4 options, out of which 3 are incorrect and 1 is correct. And please note, option D is not always correct. It's just an example to quickly demonstrate to you what an MCQ even looks like. And like I mentioned, MCQs can, of course, have more than 4 options and more than one right answer. There are so many exams out there which are like that. But in the scope of today's session and today's discussion, we are going to stick with this. And this is typically how CENTA assessments are as well. Okay, so now that we know what the anatomy of an MCQ looks like, The first step when we try to create our MCQ is to fix the objective of your assessment item. And by this, we don't mean objective of your assessment, like why am I doing this assessment? But we actually mean these objectives, which is topic, difficulty level, and cognitive level. Fixing these for your assessment item is the first step. It's a basic step that you need to do. And when we talk about topic, we basically mean knowing the subject, knowing the grade, knowing the specific topic also that you're trying to cover in the assessment item. By assessment item, we mean that one MCQ question, right? That's what we mean when we say assessment item. Then comes the difficulty level. So again, difficulty level, of course, may vary from class to class, set of students to set of students, right? So it's important you peg the difficulty level at the right level according to the context of your students. What's easy for another group of students may not necessarily be easy for your students. So keep that in mind. And then comes the cognitive level, which is basically the learning levels or the context of your students, right? What level of cognition are they at? And this is very easily defined by frameworks like Bloom's taxonomy, which is an example which tells us our students at a knowledge, understanding, or application, and therefore helps me define or fix the objective of for your MCQ or assessment item, right? And talking a bit more about Bloom's taxonomy, of course, many of you may already know about this, may already be very familiar with this pyramid and with Bloom's taxonomy in general. It's a classification of different objectives and skills that teachers set for their students. And this is something that we keep a lot in mind when we're even planning our lessons. And most of these learning objectives are based on a learning progression framework. But it's also equally important to keep that in mind in our assessments, to align that with our learning, with our lessons, right? And most assessments are done using a framework like this. So are CENTA assessments as well. We do follow Bloom's taxonomy to define the cognitive levels of our different assessment items. Okay, so now with this set, now comes the fun part where you all are going to try to create your own MCQs. So I'm going to, both of us, Upasana and I are going to give you 5 minutes. So what you all have to do is, and you can see the timer here, what you have to do is try to think of exactly these three things, right? A topic, which is a subject, grade, and a specific topic that you want to create an MCQ for. Have the difficulty level set, have the cognitive level. Is it at the knowledge? I can keep Bloom's as reference. There's remembering, there's understanding, there's knowledge, understanding, application. Think of what level of Bloom's you want to cater to, or any other framework that you use, and create your own MCQ. So basically create one question with at least 4 options, and you all have 5 minutes to do this. And keep in mind these 3 basic parameters: the topic, difficulty level, and the cognitive level. And we're going to give you 5 minutes to do this, and then we'll take a quick check in the chat box. Your time starts now. Please use a notebook and a pen to do this. Sorry, I forgot to mention. Please write it down somewhere, and yeah.
Thank you, Soumya ma'am, for sharing the question. But we'd request you to also note it in your in a on a piece of paper, or wherever you want to write it down. We will ask you to come back to that question. So request everyone to just make sure that you are thinking through. You have 3.5 minutes left. Think through. Write the kind of question that you would want to ask your students. So.
And like Upasana mentioned, we will be coming back to this throughout the session. So please do have this ready and keep it somewhere where you can keep going back to refer to it. You can put it in the chat box, but let that not be the only place you're having it.
So Savitri ma'am, you don't have to submit the question. It is for you to write it down and analyze it as we go through the webinar. It's for everyone. Please do not mention the topic on the chat box. Right now it's your work time. You still have 2 minutes, 45 seconds left. Please make sure that you are using a pen and paper, thinking through the topic, thinking about your own classrooms, and then writing a proper question with 4 options or however you want to create that multiple choice question. So please make sure that you are using the full 2.5 minutes to come up with a good MCQ question as per how you understand it right now.
Sangeeta ma'am is done. Great. Looking for more dones on the chat box. Great. Savitri ma'am is done too. Excellent. Looking for more dones. Good. Seeing a lot of dones. So you all have 1.5 minutes left. So now's the time to speeden up a bit. And if you've already created it, go through it, because like we said, the entire rest of the workshop is going to be based on this MCQ you have created. So, and it's for your reference. Don't worry, we are not going to ask you to present it to anyone, but ensure you have a good MCQ that, like Upasana said, you would want to share with your students.
A lot of you are getting done. We'll just wait for the last 1 minute. If you are still writing your question, request you to speed it up so that you are aligned with the workshop timelines.
Just a quick disclaimer that at the end of the 5 minutes, you'll hear a alarm kind of sound. Just want to ensure no one gets startled. So you all have 30 seconds left. Five seconds. Okay. I hope everyone's done. Okay, great. So we're going to move on now. Now that all of you have your questions ready with you, what I'm going to ask all of you to do is rate your MCQ on a scale of 0 to 10. And you can share your rating with us on the chat box if you want to, but this is for yourself. You yourself reflect, look at your MCQ, reflect, and rate on a scale of 0 to 10. You may have questions, okay, on what basis should I rate, etc. Whatever your parameters are, right? Whatever you think is important, keep that in mind for now and rate. We will come to the parameters in a while. So I'll give you exactly 10 seconds to do this. Rate your MCQ on a scale of 0 to 10. And I'll also say in parallel to all of you, go back to your Mentimeter window and keep that ready. Just keep that ready. Moving on to the, sorry.
Yeah, a lot of people have rated, some of you have rated it as 10.
Great.
To see that there are high scores that you have given yourselves, and some of you have been quite modest with 6 and 7. So let's look at the rest of the parameters. Yeah.
And let's also see how these ratings, are they going to change? Are they not going to change? What's going to happen? We're going to have some fun. So let's see that during the rest of the session. But now, like I said, all of you kindly switch back to the Mentimeter screen, and it's the same link, same passcode. Upasana will be entering it on the chat box again. There is a question you can see on the screen, which is, what parameters did you use for rating your MCQ? Like, on what basis did you rate yourself? A 10 or a 5 or a 6 or an 8, whatever your ratings were, what parameters did you use for rating your MCQ? And by parameters, we mean what aspects, what things did you keep in mind to rate your MCQ? Okay, so I can see some answers. Difficulty level. What is emotional intelligence? Is that a parameter or is that the question itself? So difficulty level is a parameter. Okay. Is that a parameter that defines your rating? I see something called difficulty index. Great. Comprehension level of students, difficulty level and logical reasoning. Okay. Relevance to topic. Great. Hots or lots. Okay. So that is more the cognitive level, right? Hots or lots. Cognitive relevance to topic. I see a lot of you saying cognitive level. Easy level. Okay. A simple to understand STEM, good distractors, excellent point, whoever has written that. Great. So I can see some great responses. Let me just also quickly share so that all of you can see what are the responses that you have given. Just give me a quick minute. Okay, so just give me a minute. Okay, so here are what many of you are saying. So many of you have mentioned the difficulty level. And I really like one which says a simple to understand STEM, good distractors, relevance to topic, really good. Learning objectives, okay, maybe the alignment to learning objectives. Great, okay. So I can see the responses are still coming in. Relevant options to the question, term in question, difficulty level, cognitive ability of the class, great answers. Understanding level. So many of you have mentioned the cognitive level. So does that really define how you would rate? So would you say an easy question is a lower rating and a difficult question is a higher rating? I mean, looks like many of you have even used that logic to rate yourselves. We will come to what the parameters are or what the parameters are for an impactful MCQ according to us. Great. Various types of learners, complex, application of concept. Fine. Let's come back to the session. So thank you so much. Almost 70, 80 of you shared what parameters you use for rating your MCQ. Now let's look at what we think are the main parameters of an impactful MCQ. And we just don't mean, of course, any MCQ should be impactful, but more specifically to make your MCQ impactful, what are some things that you need to keep in mind?
Okay. So one of the, or rather the most important parameter is that the right answer for that MCQ should be unambiguous. There should be no confusion about which option is the right answer. Now, in order to get to that, you should have a very, very clear question stem. The main part of the question should be should not have any ambiguity or any confusing element to it. There should be clear options, so each of those options should be well defined. Now, in framing that question, there should be no implicit assumptions, which means when you are creating that question, do not assume that the students should have some prior knowledge about what that question is assessing them on, right? each of those options should be mutually exclusive, which means that option A cannot have one part of it in option B or option C, and hence which means that A, B, C, D. If you have four options in your question, each one of them should be an exclusive item in its, or an option on its own. And best versus correct answer. So we'll also look at what is best versus correct answer in the next few slides. But these are some of the criteria or parameters of a good MCQ, which lead up to having an unambiguous right answer, which is the most important condition for an MCQ to be a good MCQ. Right. So now let's look at some of the practice MCQs. Shruti, do you want to take the first question?
Sure. So now I'll tell you how this section is going to work. So there's going to be an MCQ. We're going to do this twice, and again you need Mentimeter. So keep the Mentimeter screen handy. So what you will have to do is I'll put the question on the slide, and you will have to pick the options are put on a Mentimeter. You will just have to pick the option that you think is correct. Only one option is the correct option. Okay, and once you do that, please come back here, and we are going to discuss what Upasana just shared about parameters of what the subpoints are under unambiguous right answer, right? We are going to look at what that looks like in actual real MCQ questions. So we're going to look at that in detail for two examples. So we'll start this by actually having you answer the question so that you are fully involved in the process. Okay, so before we move on to the actual question, now that we have mentioned the first step is to fix the objective of your assessment item, we have exactly done that. So the question that we're going to have, the topic that it covers is English language. It's a grade 8 question. The topic is writing. It's a question on writing. The difficulty level is easy. It's an easy question. Easy to medium actually. And the cognitive level that it caters to is application. Okay, so as you can see, I've already fixed these parameters, and once I have this set, let's move on to the actual MCQ. So this is an English question on writing as discussed. So there is a passage that you can see here, and the passage says, you can read the passage. I'm not going to read the passage, it's the first 3 lines. And at the end of the passage, there is a question which says, including the sentence, the bakery cake angadi sold delicious pastry would, which means there is a passage and the question stem. Remember, we spoke about stem is the passage followed by the question, which is what will happen when you include this sentence, the bakery cake angadi sold delicious pastry. What will happen if you include this sentence to this passage? These are your options. Will it clarify the passage as Sarita works at the bakery? Will it distract as details of the bakery are unnecessary here? Will it not add or detract from the passage as it is actually more or less the same? So it does not really affect the passage in any way. Or it makes the passage more personal. So this is your question. These are your 4 options. We hope you understood the question. Now please move on to the Mentimeter screen and pick the option that you think is the correct answer. The same 4 options are put there on the Mentimeter screen. All you have to do is click on and submit the option that you think is the correct option. Waiting for some answers. You can see that no one's started answering yet. I hope the instructions were clear. Please let me know if you want me to repeat. Okay, great. We can see that some of you are already responding. So here's the passage. You can come to the screen, look at the passage, look at the options, go to Mentimeter and select the answer you think is correct. 10 more seconds. We can see that almost 40 of you have already answered. Great. And we can see some of you are answering on the chat box here, which is okay. But see if you can do it on the screen, on the Mentimeter screen. So many of you, we can see your answers, but I'll also quickly present what your answers are in another 5 seconds.
So we encourage everyone to use Mentimeter, given that there is, we still have blended learning, online learning. And this is a great tool to sort of like, utilize this in your class.
Yeah, I mean, you can, I mean, you already saw it. It's so visible and visually attractive to see what people are thinking and to see their answers, which is why it may seem like switching between two screens, but we hope it's quite easy and, smooth to do it. So I'm just quickly going to present what many of you have responded. Okay, so we can see that A and B are almost at the same level. Okay, A is slowly winning. So most of you think, many of you rather, think it's A clarifies the passage as Sarita works at the bakery. Also, a large chunk of you think it's B, which is distracts, as details of the bakery are unnecessary, and C and D have lesser responses. Let's come back now. So, all of you now, please come back to the presentation and let's quickly look at what the correct answer is. And then we will go into the details of, what is making it an impactful MCQ. And these are all, by the way, questions that we create at CENTA and part of our assessments as well. So this is not something that's new. This is something that we use very often. Yeah. So I'm just quickly going to share what the answer is. So it's B. Like many of you had shared, it's not A, it's B. So we will look at why B is the answer and why the others are not the answer. We will look at the reasoning for that in a bit. But just to share, the answer is B. And now let's bring back what Upasna had shared about one of the most important categories of having or creating impactful MCQs is having an unambiguous right answer. And within this, we need to ensure we have a clear question stem, clear options, no implicit assumptions, mutually exclusive options, best versus correct answer. Now let's look at how each of this played out for this MCQ that all of you just answered, right? Okay, so as you can see, the passage is clearly given, which is right there on top, and we are clearly saying what happens when we include this sentence to the passage, right? So many of you, of course, were also able to answer it, right? Which means the question itself, what was there was good context in the passage, and then the sentence was good enough for a test taker to answer it, which means the question stem was very clear, right? It's a clear question stem with no ambiguous words, etc. Now think about how the same stem would have been unclear, right? If, for example, I only had the first line of the passage, the heart attack was a setback, or I only had two lines, the heart attack was a setback, Sarita had to rest and take medicines. I only gave these two lines, and then I asked everybody to tell me what happens when I include the sentence bakery cake angadi, sold delicious pastry. Then the question stem itself becomes unclear because there's nowhere in the first two lines the mention of the word bakery. So just including the sentence firstly will seem out of place because it's nowhere in the passage if you just give me the first two lines, right? And also the options, then clearly B will stand out because clearly the bakery is nowhere in the passage, so it's distracting, right? So if we didn't add the full four lines, four sentences, it would have been unclear, which is why at this point it's a clear question stem, right? Next, the options are clear because it clearly specifies each option clearly in simple language and relevant language and not unnecessarily long, etc. Mentions what it's trying to convey, right? Each option is very clear, therefore. And how would these options have been unclear? It would have been unclear if we didn't, give the full sentences, or if the options had vocabulary that was very, very complicated, or the correct option instead of distract, we had deflect, or we had, like divulge, like confusing words, which would have made it stand out because it's clearly like not as clear as the rest, right? So therefore, at this point, all of them look on par and therefore options are clear. And again, making no implicit assumptions. If this was a passage from the textbook, assume this was a passage from the textbook, and I thought, okay, my students already know this passage, so I don't have to share the passage. Let me just ask the question, including the sentence bakery, cake, angadi, sold delicious pastry in the chapter 5, passage 1 would have done what? If I had made the question like that, then I'm assuming that my children know this passage or know where the passage is in the textbook, which is an unfair assumption. Right? At this point, we are not making any assumptions. We are giving the passage, we are giving the question, and the question is fully based on the given passage. Right? No assumptions have been made, which is why we say in this case there are no implicit assumptions. And the last point was mutually exclusive. Of course, there is another point about best versus correct answer, which Upasna will also take over. But there was another, before that, there was a point on mutually exclusive options. What do we mean by that? So, when we mean mutually exclusive, it means none of the options overlap with each other. They are all independent on their own, right? So, A, for example, it's already clear in the passage that Sarita works at the bakery because it clearly mentions her mother helped out with the children and food. Her hours at the bakery were reduced. It's already inferred that she works in the bakery. So, adding this line, bakery cake kadai sold delicious pastry is not really clarifying anything, right, about Sarita working at the bakery. It maybe gives the name of the bakery, but it's not clarifying anything about Sarita. Next, C is not correct because this is not covered elsewhere, right? The bakery cake angadi sold delicious pastry. It's not covered anywhere, so we cannot say it detracts, nor can we say it adds, right? It's more of the same. We cannot even say it's more of the same because this is new information, but it's also distracting. It's not relevant, right? And makes the passage more personal. The heart attack is actually more personal than the fact about the bakery's name. So if this is the option, again, it's clearly different from the other three. This is what we mean by mutually exclusive. Now, let me tell you how this may not have been mutually exclusive, right? Now, for example, if let's take option C. Now, in option C, if instead of saying not add or detract, as it is more of the same, if I just return it adds from the it does not add to the passage, or if I just say it detracts from the passage. If I had instead of both, if I just had one of these, then it would actually overlap with option A and B both. Because if we say it adds to the passage, it's same as saying clarifies the passage. Or if we say detracts from the passage, it's overlapping with us saying distracts as the details. So in that case, it would have not been mutually exclusive. But now, because we have mentioned it's not add or detract, it all the four options are now mutually exclusive and independent of each other. And this is why this is a good MCQ, an impactful MCQ, and it follows all the sub points that come under an unambiguous right answer. Now we're going to repeat this exercise again for one more question, and Upasna will be taking over this question. I'll be presenting. Should I just present the? Sorry, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's look at a math question. It's a grade 7 question and from the topic sets. We've chosen an easy question on the difficulty level. And this particular question tests the understanding of the concept at a Bloom's level of cognitive levels of taxonomy, right? So now the question is, which of the following best represents a set? A collection of top 100 tourist destinations in India, a collection of ingredients used in making dal curry, a collection of poems written by Kabir Das, or a collection of best 5 students in a class. So, which of the following best represents a set? What we would request you to do is again go back to Mentimeter, and you will have the 4 options that will be there. We request you to choose one of the 4 options based on your understanding of this topic itself. Is it A, B, C, or D? We post the link again. Uma ma'am says option C. We have started seeing about 9 responses, 10 responses now. on Mentimeter. And looks like option C is winning. We're waiting for a few more responses to come up.
I'll quickly present in another 10 seconds, just keeping the screen on so that you have the question here as well. Question is, which of the following best represents a set? Please look at the options. The image is just to represent a set in general, to tell that the question is on sets. It's not connected to the question. So look at the 4 options and pick what you think is correct. I'm going to present what most of you have shared.
So it looks like even on the chat group, most of you are saying option C, some option D's, and very few of you are saying option B. Now let's look at why option C is, or which of the answers is the correct answer. We have given that out already, but yeah. Okay, so looking at, if we can just go to the next slide. Okay, all right. So, of course, option C is the correct answer. Now, let's look at why this particular question is actually a good MCQ question. The stem is absolutely clear, right? So, which of the following best represents? So, we are asking you to choose which one of these options is the best option, which indicates the presence of a set. Why is A, B, or D not the correct answer? Now, A, B, and D, sorry, A and D have some implicit assumptions within them. So when we say that there is a collection of top 100 tourist destinations in India, now what is top 100 tourist destination according to which parameter, right? Or if we say a collection of best 5 students in a class, according to what parameters, right? So there are some implicit assumptions in these two options, and hence they are not defined, they're not the best type of set, so they are not the best examples of a set. Now when we say a collection of ingredients used in making dal curry, now that is, again, there could be many type of types of dal that people prepare, right? Like, and it's all a personal preference in terms of what type of ingredient I may put in, what Shruti may put in when she is cooking dal, and hence that's also not the best representation of a set. Whereas C is very clearly defined and says that these are only those poems that Kabir Das would have written, and it's not generic in nature, right? And hence option C is the right answer. But more than getting to the right answer, why is this a good question? Is because the question does not have any ambiguity when it comes to the right answer, right? It very clearly asks you to select the best out of the 4 options. Each of those 4 options are mutually exclusive, which means none of these options have anything that correlates them to the other option. They all are pertaining to different types of elements. When it comes to creating those options, there is no assumption again to say that okay, the student must have known or should have known about something to be able to answer this kind of question, right? And so if for example, if the question just read which of the following represents a set, and the best part would have been eliminated, then this question becomes a bad question, because then there is ambiguity in terms of what is a set, right? Or what is the right answer? Because each of these are sets in their in their own respect. But are they actually a good representation of set? No, because then we don't really know based on this particular question, right? And so if we look at, we can move on to the next slide. Yeah. So now that you've understood what are the different parameters, right? Like mutual exclusivity of the options, clear question stem, clear options, no implicit assumptions, and what is the best answer versus what is the correct answer. Can you go back to your MCQs and then re-rate your MCQs on these 5 subpoints? We've shared those 5 subpoints on our screen, and if you have to re-rate your own question, the one that you made, do you have a clear question stem? Are all the options clear? Have you had any assumption while you were creating that question? And are the options mutually exclusive, right? So keeping these parameters in mind, can you re-rate your question and then tell us on the chat box to say what is your current rating of your question.
You can rate all of them out of from 0 to 10, and you can just tell us, what are the scores you've given against each of this, or however you want to rate. And you can just share in the chat box. And it's also very important while you're doing this exercise, you think about, okay, so now I realize my STEM is actually not very clear. Can I quickly modify it, right? This is not a very clear option. Can I quickly? So if you can do that, great. Go ahead and try to also modify your questions. We'll wait for 5 seconds and then we'll quickly move on to the next section in the interest of time.
We'll just put the parameters in the chat box as well.
Yeah.
So Shivani ma'am, Manisha ma'am, you rated your questions as 7 again. Vijay Lakshmi ma'am feels that now she can move to 9. I feel like you had rated your question as 10. Great. Some of you have now started to evaluate your question, but these are some of the parameters that we would definitely keep in mind when we create more questions. We can move on.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so now we spoke about one big category, right, which was unambiguous right answer. Now let's move on to the next big category of what an impactful MCQ has, and that is having comparable and relevant options. And again, what do we mean by this? Right? Let's break that down further into subpoints. We basically mean having questions that are conceptually comparable, plausible, and not a trick question. Like if you're asking about a specific topic, right? One option, the three options cannot be within that topic, and one option cannot be from another topic, right? And also, it shouldn't be a question that you're asking very straightforward in a straightforward manner, but the answers, it's a trick question, so it's like a riddle or something that is twisted in the way the answer is framed, right? So it's something we need to be careful. Every option should be equally plausible to be the right option, but of course, there's a reason why it's not. Just like what we saw in the two questions earlier, they should be comparable in language. Again, we will look at what each of these mean for the two questions in detail. It should be visually comparable. When I'm looking at it on first glance, none of it should stand out. All of them should look somewhat, like correct or wrong, equally correct or wrong. Avoid using all of the above or none of the above in your options. Usually, we see a lot of MCQs with the last option being all of the above or none of the above. Unless there is a conceptual reason for this, it is not good to actually have these in your options, because it does not give you the best insights about what your students have understood or not, right? So these are basically, again, the subpoints within this big category of having comparable and relevant options. Now let's quickly go back to, yeah, and like we mentioned when I spoke about all of the above, none of the above, it's the same as saying I couldn't think of another option, and which is why I've put that. I'm sure all of us have been there and done that, but unless you have a conceptual reason, the topic lends itself well to it, please don't go for that and try to avoid having that. Okay, let's quickly come back to MCQ1. Again, this is conceptually comparable, plausible, not a trick question, because if you see all four of the points, right, they are well within the topic. Yes, we said the topic is writing, and specifically within that, it was about linkage between a topical sentence and additional sentence, right? And a sentence adding effect to the existing passage. If it would have been, maybe it would have been not conceptually comparable if one of the options was the style of writing is descriptive or narrative, or we had some of these words in the options, then I would say it's not conceptually comparable because we are going off topic, right? Now next, let's come to the point on comparable in language. So you can see the boxes that I've put. You can see I have clarified, distract, not add or detract, personal. You can see that the vocabulary used is on the same page in every option, right? Which means language is similar. None of the options stand out to me that, oh, okay, this looks attractive, or okay, this is definitely wrong. So it's very important to keep that in mind. Visually comparable. By visually comparable, we basically mean, the length of the options, the vocabulary we use. I mean, that's also comparable in language. So these are the points. Of course, in this, C may seem longer than A, B, and D, but that's not the right option, right? So therefore, it doesn't. So if B was this long, we would say that's not the right way to approach, because then it stands out. But if the wrong option is a bit lengthier than the others, it's still okay. It's still best to avoid that, but it's okay to have this. And of course, we have not used any all of the above and none of the above because this question, having that option would have again just meant I couldn't come up with a fourth option. Conceptually, it does not make sense. There's no reason to have that. So in this way, this by the way, just to reiterate, is the same question MCQ1 that all of you have answered about Sarita and the cake Angadi bakery. So we have just looked at the options now, and we have discussed how all four options are comparable and plausible in their own way. Okay, coming to the next MCQ.
Right. So it's the same set of parameters that we are going through this, and we'll quickly go through this in the interest of time. Now, all the options are conceptually comparable. It's not a trick question. We're not asking about some trivia over here. They are comparable in language. They have, if you notice, each of those four options start with a collection of, right. So that is very consistent in each of the four options. They are visually comparable, which means if you look at it, option A and B both have the same length, option C and D almost the same length, and so therefore the right answer does not stand out to say that that's the right answer because of the length of the option. And again, we've not used all of the above or none of the above because that would not give us a clear understanding of how the students are actually answering, right? So the same set of parameters to gauge this question as well. Right. So we'll ask you to go back to your question again and see if you could rate this again, your own MCQ on these four subpoints. Is your question conceptually, or rather, are your options conceptually comparable? That is, I have not put a trick question over there. Is the language consistent in all the four options, right? So have I used anything that is making the option stand? For example, have I used any proper noun in only the right answer, and hence that will make someone choose that right answer? Or visually comparable, like we said. And have I used all of the above or none of the above? As a rule, I think from today onwards, you will try and avoid using all of the above and none of the above, because that's not a clear indicator of your students' conceptual clarity, right? So, Swati ma'am, Vasanti ma'am, we still have 9 and a 10 for your questions. And I think that's a great start.
We would want to see what questions you have.
Right. So, would request all of you to go back to your MCQs, the one that you created right at the beginning, and again rate your questions. We still see 9 and 8.
Great. I mean, if the questions are at a 9 and 8, you definitely should. We definitely would love to see those questions.
Right. Some of you putting option C, so there's no option here. These are four parameters based on what you should be evaluating your question. So the four options or five options that you've put in for your MCQ, how would you rate those now that you have an understanding?
Okay, we'll wait for another 5 seconds and then we'll move on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So see that still some of you, Rashmi ma'am, Sudha ma'am, you have a high score for your questions. Great. Let's move on. Yeah. Okay. So with insights, now what are insights, right? Now insights are the explanation of your options, right? So you've written down those options, keeping the concept or the possible misconception in mind, right? So why do we need to write the insights, or what are these insights? And also, how are these distractors actually helping you bring out those misconceptions in students, right? So let's look at what the insights are for the first question, basically explaining why each of those options are correct or incorrect. So option B was correct in the cake angry question, where the main idea there is to highlight the after effect of the heart attack, and hence that was the right option. Now let's just go ahead with the rest of the options. So if you look at option A, C, and D, so option A is incorrect because that would indicate that either the student has not understood the passage itself and they do not know what main idea means. So, which means it gives you an indication of what the misconception is. Option C is incorrect because that particular set of information is there only to distract the readers, right? So, if someone actually picks option C, you know that they don't understand what is a distractor out of those four options. And option D, the student is not clear what makes a paragraph personal. So they don't understand what a personal opinion or versus what a general set of information is. Right?
So what you can see here, like what Upasana mentioned, right? The point of writing these MCQs and writing these options is to get that misconception that students have, and you can see how we've clearly listed down what the correct answer concept, what the right answer is, and the thought process behind that, and what is the misconception students may have because of why they are picking the other three options. Each option has a different misconception associated with it, which is the whole point of MCQs and how they should be designed.
Right. Let's quickly also look at the second one, the one that was for math. Now, option C was the correct option. It's a well-defined collection of sets, no ambiguity at all. Now, like I had mentioned in the question itself, so option A and option D are incorrect because there is no clear parameter to determine the top or the best five students, right? So they were not a clear set. And option B is incorrect because you could define some of those ingredients, but the process of making dal itself is very personal, and so there is a personal view, personal preference that is involved. Hence, now if you look at both the questions of the question MCQ1 and MCQ2, we've written elaborate explanation of why not just the right answer is the right answer, but why each of those incorrect answers are incorrect, right? What is the kind of misconception they bring about? Hence, when you design an MCQ, don't just look at the quality of the question, but also look at each of those options from an understanding of what is the kind of misconception does it indicate for me, which is then going to inform about your own class, the students, and the context that they are coming in.
And also, if you see, insights is nothing but a culmination of everything we discussed till now, right? So when you have this well defined, the insights, of course, your question is no more going to be unambiguous. Your right answer is not going to be unambiguous because every option has a different thought or misconception associated with it, right? And similarly, all your options are therefore going to be comparable because you would have reasoned out the purpose of each option, which is why this is a very important step and exercise for you to do when you're creating MCQs. To next to the option, write the reason why this is correct or why this is incorrect. Automatically, this could inform you to actually have unambiguous MCQs options with all the subpoints under it, and similarly have comparable language in your MCQs with all the subpoints under it. So consider this as a culmination of the two main categories we looked at.
Okay, all right. So now just going back to the question again, and we will try to do this faster. Rate your own MCQ on the subpoint, aligning at least one distractor or more distractors to relevant misconception. You all know your subjects really, really well, and think about your classroom and think about your question that you have created. The four options apart from the options apart from the correct answer, what is the misconception that each of those options indicate, right? So have you put the relevant distractors to make sure that the students are working through them to get to the right answer? So let's do this quickly in the next 5 to 10 seconds.
And this will, for now, of course, you may not have written it down, you may or may not have, even if it's in your mind, if you're able to bring that out for each option, then you would definitely rate yourself high. And if you feel like there is no insight behind an option, then that's when you would rate yourself low. So look at each option of yours and quickly do this. You don't need any code, teachers. You just have to put it in the chat box.
Yeah, you can just put the
rating in
the chat box. For the feedback link, we will share the code shortly. But for your own MCQs, please put the rating in the chat box.
So we still have 15 minutes to go, and we have quite little bit left. So we will now move on to the next section, which is basically just to summarize, right? What are the characteristics of an impactful MCQ? It's literally what we just covered. We are summarizing that in a nice one slide pictorial way for all of you to also assimilate and reflect on what was just covered. So, number one, objective of assessment item, right? Can somebody mention in the chat box what that means? Quick check for understanding. What do we mean by objective, sorry, of assessment item? What did we cover within this?
Right, Savitri ma'am, Chaitra ma'am, we're just cold calling right now based on whoever is putting their scores. Great. So Rima ma'am says, what is your goal?
Okay. Yeah. So topic, yeah, that could come under topic, difficulty level, and cognitive level. That's what we covered there. Then comes unambiguous right option, within which we covered like 5 subpoints. Then options that are comparable. Again, we covered like 4 subpoints within this. Don't worry, we will be sharing these points with you as well. And then the ability to derive meaningful insights from every option. And by that, we mean insights that show what the misconception is, right? So to summarize, these are the 4 main characteristics of an impactful MCQ. And as you saw, we didn't share this upfront with you. We did this in a very nice practice, like based activity based way. We hope you all were able to understand what each of these characteristics mean through the exercise. So,
all right. So Shruti and I tried to explain to you in terms of what are some of the basic things that you should keep in mind when you're creating your MCQs. But as teachers, you should be, and educators, you should be aware of the key principles that also go in while creating MCQs. Now, these are at a high level where we also encourage you to, refer to CENTA's website where we have advanced master, courses to help you understand these in detail. Right now, we're leaving you with some of the key terms and terminologies. So one of the terminology is the difficulty percentage. Now, out of your class of students or grade of students, what percentage of your test takers are likely to get the right answer, right? So you have created a question, what is the percentage of those students who've taken the test who can get the right answer? That determines the difficulty level. The next parameter is the discrimination, right? So now, will your high performing test takers do much better, much better than your low performing test takers with that question? Is that distinction very low or is the distinction very high? That is the discrimination level.
An example for this is actually, for a low, a high performing, let's assume a low discrimination index, right? If it's a question on when did India get independence, right? That we already know that most of our test takers are going to get that right? We are assuming that most of them will. And therefore, then that's a very low discrimination index because it means that it's not good enough, the question, because everybody knows the answer. Or if you ask a question which is like, well, when did Cambodia get independence, for example, that you ask a student that when you've never covered history of Cambodia, then that'll have, again, that most of them are going to get wrong. So again, that is also not a good example of good discrimination. So this is an example of what we mean by discrimination.
Right. So reliability is your question designed such that test takers are likely to answer it consistently over time or across contexts, which means no matter where that question is put, right? So a student coming in from like a rural setting or an urban setting, they should be able to answer it equally well, and that is the reliability. It should not change based on the context or the as the time passes by. Validity is whether your question is testing with all the parameters known to the students, right? So for example, you are testing something in math, but you have put a word which only 5 or 6 students know about, rest of the other students
quite esoteric or
right,
something.
so rest of the students cannot actually answer that question because they did not understand that one word itself. Like some of the students, if they know a German word, then and if that is the question, that's the word in the question, only those students will be able to answer. The rest of the students who don't know that question, even though they understand the concept, they won't be able to answer that question, and hence the validity of that particular question is going to be low. Right, so these are some key principles that we would like to leave you with, but encourage you to sign up to center to see what kind of courses you could take to understand these in more detail.
Yeah, we are cognizant and aware that these may seem a bit more advanced, and which is why in the scope of this course, we are not covering this in more detail. But it is important for you to keep these key principles in mind when you're thinking of creating MCQs. And yeah, so this is a thought we'd like to leave you with. And before we close for today, we actually want to take some time to share. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about this later. We do want to share a checklist with all of you. Whatever we discussed in today's session, we actually want all of you to have this checklist. Whatever's on my screen, similar to that, if you can just share the link, Upasna. If you click on this link, you should be able to download a PDF, and this PDF is basically a checklist that you can use. You can share it with any other teacher you know. And it's a checklist of what are things or parameters to keep in mind when I'm creating impact, when I'm creating my MCQs, right, in order to make it impactful. So it has a basic parameter check where it talks about, have you decided topic, have you decided difficulty, cognitive. So it looks at the objective of the assessment. It even does checks like, have you done a plagiarism check, have you ensured the language used is simple, relevant? And then it moves to the three big categories we discussed today: unambiguous right option, options that are comparable and mutually exclusive, ability to derive meaningful insights from options, right? All of this is covered and it's put as parameters, and this is a rating checklist. So what you need to do is, you can create several copies, you can have a e-copy, whatever you want to, and you need to rate yourself every time you create an assessment item or an MCQ. Rate yourself against each of these, right? And it will help you then understand, is my MCQ actually impactful or not, or what should I change, or ask somebody else to rate it for you, right? You can do a peer rating, peer review, and help each other out. And in this way, we are hoping all of you leave with a good takeaway to help you create impactful MCQs. And to also get access to more such additional resources and questions, you can please log on to openm.centa.org. And if you click on this section, which is on question of the day, right? And you click on access now, you can actually see that every day I think most of you are already signed on this portal. So all you have to do is go to the section on question of the day, and click on that, and every day you will actually get an MCQ question, just like how today it was just a glimpse of answering center questions. So all of you got to respond to 2 questions, and we did a fun practice exercise. Here you will actually see questions every day that are put. Every day a new question is put, and you can try answering, and you will actually also get points on your my center learning. So yeah, you can find additional resources here, and we hope that many of you have got access, have been able to download this checklist. Otherwise, we'll definitely be sharing it with the BSSCA school, I mean the administration also, and they should be able to share it with you or put it on the respective website. So please don't worry about it. And on that note, Pasna and I are ending today's session. So we're very, very happy to see all of you, and we hope you all got good takeaways from the session. Please go to the feedback form, click the feedback form, and submit it. We have also asked there, if any of you are interested in an advanced course, which we discussed about the principles, etc. That is something we can do as well. And we would love to know what you thought about the first webinar in the series of webinar series between Bangalore Sahodaya Schools and Center. And your feedback is very valuable, because you know that we're going to meet several times now, and it will really help us inform our next session and make it better for you, and give you a great learning experience. So please take it will not take you more than a minute. So please click on the link on the chat box and fill the feedback form. And on that note, We still have 3 minutes, so I'm just going to. We still have 3 minutes, so just going to be on the screen, and we can also take any questions in the chat box if any. And meanwhile, people can please keep filling and submitting the feedback form. So if any of you have any questions, I think we can just take that. I'll also come back to stop sharing my screen and come back to the comment section and see if any of you have any feedback you want to share here, any questions you want to ask, any comments. Sorry, I was on mute. Sudha ma'am is asking how to conduct a plagiarism check. Ma'am, I mean, right now there are so many softwares out there. So you just Google on the internet, just type plagiarism checker. Or you can even just, like whenever you have a question, just directly put that on Google search. Even that itself is it's a rudimentary basic way, but that also should help you help you understand if it's a plagiarized question or not. And by plagiarism, we mean not only question that's word to word copied, but also it's literally the same thing which is rephrased and used. So even that is a plagiarized question, which is a bit more difficult to detect. But at least you can do a plagiarism checker. I'm guessing should help even with that. So Lerma ma'am has given an idea for plagiarism. We are using Turnitin. Yeah, that's a great plagiarism tool. Good one to use. I'm not sure if it's free, but it's a good plagiarism tool to use. Any other questions? We still have 2 more minutes and then we'll end. Thank you so much for your feedback. Please do fill the feedback form also, which is something we record and we take into consideration while planning every session of ours. We have 1 minute.
Thank you everyone for your appreciation, but we'd also love to see you putting this in practice. It's been great interacting with a lot of you, but we'd also love to see how you are putting this in practice in your respective classrooms. So yeah.
We hope many of you actually use the checklist that we have shared. We have specifically created it for you to be able to use it, print it, scan it, use it, with pen and paper, etc. And we hope you actually are able to use a lot of things in today's session. On that note, we thank everyone again for joining. We thank Bangalore Sahodaya Schools for collaborating with us, having us on board for this entire webinar series. Thank you so much, teachers. I think you've been an excellent audience. We've had a great time interacting with all of you. We hope to see you again in the next session. Till then, goodbye, good evening. See you next week.